Taida Mishtatvim today. Thank you. We're going to go now and going to join to a Safras class by Rabbi Chaim Pape. He's going to discuss the minig regarding writing the parshias when it comes to Hilchos Tefillin. So please give your attention to Rabbi Pape.
You see, just want to confirm if you see the slides?
Yes, I do.
Wonderful.
I do, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, good evening, and it's very special to honor the memory and of Rabbi Wilhelm, who was whose trademark was not only lumdus but really a varmkeit and an intimate connection to all his talmidim and to everyone who he came in touch with. Tonight's presentation, we're going to speak about the minhag Chabad of the spacing in tefillin. One of the most bold and outstanding, visible things that make the Chabad tefillin different is the spacing that there is before the paragraph V'hoya im Shemoya. So on the top of the slide, you see the 4 paragraphs of the Shal Yad lined up from right to left, the first paragraph, second, third, and fourth. And the bottom, you have a picture. That is tefillin that was written by the Sefer of the Alter Rebbe, Reb Reuven Yanovitcher. This is the legend is that it was written by him, or the Frierdiker Rebbe writes by his Talmud, who had a very, very similar ksav to him. And it is now in the hands of the Gerari family. And this picture was taken recently, a few years ago. And so one of the very bold and visible things that are unique about the Chabad tefillin is the spacing that is before the paragraph V'hoya im Shemoya. And in tonight's presentation, I'd like to show the background, the halachic background behind this minhag, what we have in minhag Chabad. So generally, we know that the Torah has paragraph breaks, 669 paragraph breaks plus 5, because we don't count the beginning of each chumash, the beginning of Bereshis and the beginning of the Ve'ela Shmais B'nai Yisrael, the beginning of Vayikra al Moshe, Bamidbar Dvarim. Those are not part of the count of the paragraph breaks. So 669 paragraph breaks plus the 5 beginnings of the 5 chumashim. The tefillin has 4 paragraphs, 4 in the Shal Rosh and 4 in Shal Yad. The mezuzah has 2 parts to it, and Megillas Esther has 17 paragraph breaks plus 1, meaning the beginning is counted as is not included, or 1601 different versions of the Megillas Esther. Now, the amount that is required for a paragraph, for us to know that what's coming after the space is a paragraph, because we obviously know that there is space between letters, there's space between words, and how do we differentiate and how can we define what space makes the next text on another letter of the same word or another word or another paragraph? So when it comes to a paragraph, the halacha is that nine letters is required in order to show that the following text is a new paragraph. Lichatchila, we were looking to make 9 large letters, the size of asher, asher, asher. But b'diavad, even if it's a little bit less than that, as long as we have the space of 9 small letters, that would also be enough to consider the following text a new paragraph. If, however, there is less than 9 small letters, then we'll say that that is a continuation of the very same paragraph, even though there's a little extra space between the words, but it's still 2 words of the very same paragraph. Now, there's a very interesting thought that's brought in the Maharshal and Simon Lamed Zayin, who wonders, why is it that we find that in Chazal they speak about paragraphs, that the reason that there is a paragraph is because Hashem wanted to give Moshe Rabbeinu time to process the content of the previous paragraph before we go on to carry on to the next paragraph. But Chazal never actually taught us why is there a difference between a parsha psucha and a parsha stuma, an open paragraph and a closed paragraph. And then in the minutes that will follow, we will see the difference, the halachic difference between an open paragraph and a closed paragraph. But just to understand the logic of why is there these 2 types of paragraphs, says the Maharshal that there are two types of paragraphs. One is a paragraph that is completely a new concept, that is not related to the previous paragraph. And then we have a paragraph that is a new idea, but it is also related to the previous paragraph. And that, he says, is the difference between a parsha psucha and a parsha stuma. An open paragraph means that it's a totally new concept. A parsha stuma, however, is also a new concept and at the same time also related to the previous paragraph. Now, in the configuration of what needs to be done in order for the following paragraph to become a parsha psucha or a parsha stuma, an open paragraph or a closed paragraph. So there are many halachic opinions, but we can summarize. The most notable ones are the opinion of the Rosh and the opinion of the Rambam. The opinion of the Rosh is that the difference between a parsha psucha and a parsha stuma is that a parsha psucha is made in such a way that the space is totally open to the margin. So it doesn't matter if the space is in the beginning of the line, if the space is at the end of the line, or if the space is on both. The fact that there is an adequate paragraph space, and that space is open to the side margin, that makes the following paragraph a parsha psucha, an open paragraph. If, however, the space is closed in with text from both sides, and the space is not, so to say, exposed to the margin, it's not open to the margin, that makes the following paragraph to be a closed paragraph. And the Rosh says also that if there is one line that is completely empty, that would be the equivalent of the space being closed in by text from both sides. Even though technically you see that the space is open to the margins, but since when you take a step back and you see that it's like an equal proportion of the space in relation to the text, and you could therefore the text is closing in on the space from both ends equally, and this would be considered that the next paragraph is a parsha stuma, a closed paragraph. So in summary, according to the Rosh, if the space is an open space, open to the margin, the following paragraph is an open paragraph, a parsha psucha. If the space is a closed space, it's closed in by text, then the following paragraph is a closed paragraph, a parsha stuma. The Rambam, however, is of the opinion that the way we make the configuration of a parsha psucha and a parsha stuma doesn't go by whether the space is an open space or a closed space, but it goes by where are the first words of the paragraph. If the first word of the new paragraph is at the beginning of the line, then that paragraph is an open paragraph because the paragraph opened the line. It launched the line. The line was launched with text, then that line begins an open paragraph, a parsha psucha. If, however, the paragraph begins in the middle of a line, then that paragraph is a closed paragraph, it's a parsha stuma. So you see on the right side of the slide, you have a paragraph space that is a paragraph space that it's at the end of the line, and then the next paragraph begins at the beginning of the line, that would be a parsha psucha. Similarly, says the Rambam, if you have an entire line that's empty and the next line begins the paragraph, since the paragraph begins at the beginning of the line, then the parsha is a parsha psucha. And you see on the left side, if it's closing from both sides, since the text begins in the middle of the line, that is a parsha stuma. Similarly, in the next case, where you have a full space at the beginning of the line and the text begins in the middle of the line, that's parsha stuma. And also in the last case, where you have a full space twice. So the Shulchan Aruch brings these two opinions in Yoreh De'ah, in Hilchos Sefer Torah, and he says that a Yirei Shamayim needs to be yotzeh both opinions, the opinion of the Rambam and the opinion of the Rosh. And therefore, if you're about to make a parsha psucha, an open paragraph, you have to make the configuration in such a way that would satisfy both the Rosh and the Rambam. And so here you have on the right side, you have a parsha psucha that satisfies both opinions, because according to the Rosh, this would be a parsha psucha because the space is open to the margin. It's an open space. And according to the Rambam also, it's a parsha psucha because the text is at the beginning of the line. And on the left side, we have a parsha stuma that satisfies both opinions. According to the Rosh, this is a parsha stuma because the space is closed in by text on both sides. And according to the Rambam, this is also a parsha stuma because the text begins in the middle of the line. If, however, continues the Ramah and says, the Ramah continues and says that if you find yourself in a situation that you cannot satisfy both opinions, then you have to follow strictly the opinion of the Rambam, because that is the principal halacha, follows the Rambam. When it comes to this, when it comes to paragraph spacing, the paragraph break is primarily follows the opinion of the Rambam. And so if you cannot satisfy both, you should follow the Rambam. If, however, you find the Sefer Torah that was written consistently according to the Rosh, then we cannot call it pasuk. Obviously, if there's a Sefer Torah that sometimes wants to use the opinion of the Rosh or sometimes the Rambam, that wouldn't hold. But if it's consistently using the Rosh, we cannot call it pasuk. But lechatchila, you have to use the Rambam when you cannot use both. What would be a case that would be pasuk? If a person makes a closed paragraph instead of where it needs to be an open paragraph, he makes a closed paragraph, that would be pasuk. If a person makes an open paragraph instead of a closed paragraph, that would be pasuk. This is what it says in the Gemara and Shabbos. Similarly, as we mentioned before, if there's supposed to be a paragraph space and he leaves less than 9 small letters, then he doesn't have a paragraph space. And if there is not supposed to be a paragraph break, it's in the middle of one paragraph and he leaves extra space, even as little as 9 small letters, then he has a full paragraph space in the middle of a paragraph, and that would make that would make it pasuk. Now, when it comes to tefillin, so the first 3 paragraphs of the tefillin, Kadesh li kol b'chor, v'hoya ki v'yacha, and Shema Yisrael, in the Sefer Torah, these 3 paragraphs are a parsha psucha. They are an open paragraph. And therefore, when in tefillin, we're also going to make it exactly the same thing. We're going to make that these 3 paragraphs are a parsha psucha that they begin at and we do it according to everyone. We do it that it begins at the beginning of the line, and there's a full paragraph space beforehand at the end of the previous paragraph. And that would make the following paragraph a parsha psucha, an open paragraph. Obviously, before the first paragraph, we don't need a space. Just like in the Sefer Torah, before Bereshis Bara, there is no space. But the 4th paragraph in the Tefillin, V'hoya im Shemaya, in the Torah, it's a parsha stuma. And we know that if we would want to make a parsha stuma in the tefillin, and such a parsha stuma that would satisfy all opinions, we said before that the only way to satisfy all opinions with a parsha stuma is to make that the space is on one line, and the line begins with the last word of the previous paragraph, and the line ends with the first word of the following paragraph, and in the middle is a space. This would be a parsha stuma according to the Rosh and according to the Rambam. It would be a parsha stuma according to the Rosh because the space is closed in. It would also be a parsha stuma according to the Rambam because the paragraph begins in the middle of the paragraph. This cannot be done in tefillin. Why can't it be done in tefillin? Because in tefillin, each paragraph must be in its own column. So there is no way to make one line that has the end of Shema and space and the beginning of V'hoya im Shemaya on the same line. We cannot do it at the end of Shema, and we cannot do it in the beginning of V'hoya im Shemaya, since each paragraph needs to be in its own column. So there's no way to make that V'hoya im Shemaya should be a parsha stuma in tefillin that would satisfy all opinions. Therefore, the Shulchan Aruch in Hilchas Tefillin and Erech Chaim says, and similar as we know that the Psak in Yeridea is that we follow the Rambam. Similarly, over here, the Shulchan Aruch in Erech Chaim says that we follow the Rambam. And how we would make it a stuma according to the Rambam? How do you make it a stuma according to the Rambam? Is that we want V'hayim Shemaya to begin in the middle of the line. So the entire paragraph space is going to be right before V'hayim Shemaya. No space is necessary at the end of Shema. Shema will finish at the end of the line of that column, or a little space, that's fine. But in the beginning, the main thing is that before V'hayim Shemaya begins, we leave a full paragraph space and begin V'hayim Shemaya in the middle of the line. That would be a stuma according to the Rambam. There was a custom in Ashkenaz, in Europe, that the Ramah documents, and that is a custom, an interesting custom. This custom is to make all of the paragraphs of Parsha Psucha an open paragraph, even the fourth paragraph. Why is there this custom, and what is the rationale? Is because while there is an opinion, this is the opinion of the Rambam, that each paragraph in the Tefillin must be exactly the way it is in the Torah. A Parsha Psucha in the Torah must be also, a Parsha Psucha in the Tefillin must be, if a paragraph is Psucha in the Torah, it must be Psucha in Tefillin, and if it's a Stuma in the Torah, it must be Stuma in Tefillin. There is, however, another opinion that says that it's okay to make all of the paragraphs in Tefillin a Psucha. Why would it be okay? Remember, we mentioned before the Maharshal. The Maharshal said that an open paragraph means that it's a totally new concept. And a Parsha Stuma, a closed paragraph, means Parsha Stuma means that it's a related paragraph. A Parsha Psucha is a new concept. A Parsha Stuma is new, but also related to the previous paragraph. Now, the V'hayim Shemaya in the Torah is related to which paragraph? It's related to the paragraph which comes right before it in Parshas Eikev. It's not related to the paragraph Shema Yisrael, which is several paragraphs earlier in the Torah. In fact, it's a whole Sedra earlier. It's in Parshas Veschanan. Between Shema and V'hayim Shemaya, we have 6 Pesucha paragraphs and many more Stuma paragraphs. So the V'hayim Shemaya is related to the paragraph that comes just before it in the Sefer Torah. It is not related to Shema Yisrael. So therefore, even if we would make in the Tefillin V'hayim Shemaya Psucha, and that shows that it's a new concept, it's okay because it's showing us that it's a new concept where we're coming from. We're coming from Shema Yisrael, which is the text that we're dealing with. And so that is why there's an opinion that says that if we make all of the paragraphs in Tefillin to be a psucha, the Tefillin would be kosher. And from this, we also understand that this opinion doesn't say that we can make them all stuma, because that we cannot have them related when they're really not related. When the Torah tells us that it's a new topic, and we come and we say that it's a related paragraph, that obviously wouldn't hold. But over here, specifically in this case, where V'hayim Shemaya is not related to Shema, this opinion holds that it's okay to make the V'hayim Shemaya psucha. And the Ramah says that there was this custom that since it's impossible to make V'hayim Shemaya stuma according to everyone, so therefore they relied on this opinion that said that you could make them all a psucha, and that's how and that's a minhag that was prevalent in the time of the Ramah. But as time went on, this minhag kind of faded as well. Now, there is an opinion also, the opinion of the Taz. In order to understand the opinion of the Taz, we will mention what the Rambam says. The Rambam says that if you have a small space, usually we said that if you have a small space that's less than 9 letters, that doesn't count as a paragraph space. But the Rambam says that if you have a paragraph space before the new paragraph, and the next paragraph begins in the middle of the line, even if the space is not at the beginning of that line, the next paragraph is still considered the Parsha Stuma. So look, for example, in the middle diagram, you see that this new paragraph begins in the middle of the line, but the full paragraph space is where? Is on the line above. So the Rambam says the fact that you left the full paragraph space at the end of line 1, that means that the next paragraph is a new paragraph. And the fact that you left a little space at the beginning of the line makes it a stuma, makes it a closed paragraph, because the text is starting in the middle of the line. So that means that less than 9 letters is not enough to make a paragraph space, but it is enough to tell us that the next paragraph is a Parsha Stuma, is a closed paragraph. So the Rambam is the one that says that even though less than 9 letters is not a paragraph space, but it is enough to make the following paragraph a Parsha Stuma. Based on this, says the Taz, that if you do less than 9 letters at the end of Shema, and less than 9 letters at the beginning of V'hayim Shemaya, then those two can be combined and put together to become a single paragraph space. And what type of a paragraph would the next paragraph be? It would be a Parsha Stuma according to the Rambam, and perhaps even according to the Rosh. So this is a new chiddush of the Taz. The Taz says that not only is less than 9 letters enough to make the next paragraph a stuma, but also less than 9 paragraphs plus less than 9 paragraphs on 2 separate lines can be combined, that the next paragraph is a Parsha Stuma. And he says this would be according to the Rambam and maybe even according to the Rosh. The truth is, it's not entirely a chiddush of the Taz. It comes from the Maharam Padua, which comes from the Smak on Hilchas Mezuzah. This is where the makar of the Taz is. But the chiddush of the Taz here is that if we have a new configuration of a stuma, of a closed paragraph that satisfies the Rambam and the Rosh, then now we have a good answer, a good approach of what to do with the tefillin to make a stuma, to make the V'hayim Shemaya, that would be a stuma that would satisfy both opinions. There is, and when the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch was published in the 5-year span after the Alter Rebbe was nostalgic, after he passed away, between the years Tovkuf Ayin Daled and Tovkuf Ayin Vav, I believe, Tovkuf Ayin Zayin. And at that time, when the Shulchan Aruch was published, the Shulchan Aruch, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he brings the opinion of the Taz, and he sides with the Shulchan Aruch. He sides with the Mechaber that a person should make a stuma according to the Rambam. And as a footnote in the Kuntres Achron, the publishers of the Shulchan Aruch, which is the sons of the Alter Rebbe or the brother of the Alter Rebbe, wrote a footnote in which they wrote that the Alter Rebbe made a takana. He instituted among all the seifrim of the region to leave a full paragraph space twice, a full paragraph space at the end of Shema, and a full paragraph space in the beginning of V'hayim Shemaya. And the footnote continues that there was a pilpul, a very deep pilpul that was written by the Alter Rebbe, but it was lost. And we don't know on this topic, and we don't know where that pilpul is. About 30 years later, in Tafreish Vav, this was discovered. This ksav of the Alter Rebbe was discovered, and it was published then as a tshuva, and it's the tshuva Siman Aleph. It's the first tshuva of the Alter Rebbe, and Shalos Tshuvas of the Alter Rebbe. It's also printed in the back of the Shulchan Aruch since then. And in it, the Alter Rebbe explains the reason of his takana, and that is based on the Sefer HaTruma. The Sefer HaTruma primarily follows the Shita of the Rosh, that the way we define an open paragraph of Parsha Psucha is if the space is an open space. If the space is open to the margin, that makes the following paragraph a Parsha Psucha. But, says the Sefer HaTruma, if, however, we have an open space twice, once at the end of the previous line and once at the beginning of the next line, that would not be a Parsha Psucha, that would be a Parsha Stuma. So even though the Sefer HaTruma primarily follows the logic of the Rosh, that an open paragraph is made by an open space, but if we have two open spaces, then it loses its status as an open paragraph and it becomes a closed paragraph. If so, we have now, so the Takana of the Alter Rebbe is to leave a full space at the end of Shema and a full space at the beginning of V'hayim Shemaya, which according to the Rambam, we know for sure is a stuma because the text begins in the middle of the line. And this would also be a stuma according to the Sefer HaTruma, which primarily follows the opinion of the Rosh, that an open space means an open paragraph, but two open spaces makes a closed paragraph. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe made a takana that the tefillin should be written in such a way that there's a full paragraph space twice, once at the end of Shema and again at the beginning of V'hayim Shemaya. Over here, again, you have the image of that same pair of tefillin, a close-up. I'd like to conclude with a letter of the Rebbe from someone. This is printed in Igros Kodesh, Chelik Tesvav, the 15th volume, where someone asked the Rebbe about ordering tefillin for a family member that comes from a Chabad family, and he wanted to know how the tefillin should be written. What was he asking about? What was his suffix about how the tefillin should be written? So most people understand that the person was asking about using the Alter Rebbe's Ksav. However, some people understand that this was about the paragraph spacing that we just mentioned. Regardless, the answer of the Rebbe is relevant also to the way, even if it was written about the Alter Rebbe's Ksav, it still holds weight also regarding our conversation. And the Rebbe answers, Olapele hasofek bazeh. I'm surprised at even at the doubt about it. Ki arei klal v'psak dinhu de ba'asrei de rav nog kerav hashayachim l'rav nog kerav. That those who belong to a rav follow the rav, and therefore since the bar mitzvah boy comes from a Chabad family, so there's no question that they follow the ruling of the Alter Rebbe. And the next question that you ask, that Hashem certainly wants us to do something that most of Klal Yisrael do. Hanhaga hanirtze hishanegim b'roiv Klal Yisrael. Hashem wants us to do that which is done by most of Klal Yisrael. In other words, the question implies that even if we have an answer, but still the fact that most people are doing otherwise, not like the Alter Rebbe, then not in the Chabad way, then maybe we shouldn't, just because most Klal Yisrael aren't. So the Rebbe says, "Lepel al kush yezu." I'm surprised at this question. Sharei pasha shegam Rabbeinu Azaken ratzel l'taken tefillin be'ofen she'en ratzei be'en HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Alter Rebbe also wanted to institute tefillin in such a way that would be pleased by Hashem. And it's obvious that in the times of the Alter Rebbe, there were even less people who were following his institutions. And so therefore, you should dwell on doing Nasa before Nishma, following the instructions of our Rabbeim, which happens to be also the path for all of Klal Yisrael. Yes?
Yashar Gadol. It was very, very special. And thank you for coming with such clear slides and making chiddush and explain to us the whole shita. And Yashar for giving this opportunity and to honor the covet of Avi Mighty.